it's really important to build a solution with IP that you don't need to have a degree in rocket science to be able to build it. And I think, at the end of it, it's operators that are operating the system. And so you should really try and make it as easy as possible for them to maximize the use of the technology, not be completely swamped by the technology.
Hey everyone, Chris here, and welcome to another AV lockdown conversation. Today I'm joined by Lawo's Chief Technology Officer, Phil Myers. Welcome, Phil.
Chris, nice to see you.
I guess the question that I'd like to ask you first is probably one you've had to answer probably every day for the last 18 months, but in your view, has COVID created an alternative live production future that we didn't really see coming, or has it simply catapulted us into the future that we were already headed for?
I mean, yeah, it's a very good question. I think if I look back a couple of years ago when I joined Lawo, we clearly identified a number of areas where we see the industry moving towards, and one of those at the time was towards remote production. But we felt that probably the biggest priorities back then was to continuing our large scale investment in production, whether it be infrastructure or whether it be theaters, events. But certainly remote production was building and getting more popular as people were looking to connect venues together or to connect infrastructure together, maybe for things like disaster recovery. But obviously in the last 18 months, what we've seen is a lot of people have had to ultimately change the way that they work in order to keep their business going and still make the content available to the consumers. And I think what I've seen is, I don't see it as a big shift in the way that we were working. I see it that we just accelerated the process. And so my personal belief was that remote production or remote ways of working was going to increase over maybe a 5-7 year period. But I think what you see now is it's very, very quickly accelerating even further, maybe into a 3-5 period. But it does bring challenges, and one of the big challenges that we see is around security. Obviously, once content is inside of your facility or inside of your production area, you have pretty strong control of it. But obviously, as you have to traverse remote connectivity, then that brings concerns of not only the reliability of the content, but most importantly, the security of it, especially if it's premium content, which is going to go maybe to a subscription service.
Yeah, indeed. What are the key ingredients as far as that has allowed us to work remotely?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look back maybe a little bit further back, so to around 2009, 2010, Lawo was already making good progress at that point into IP, with our work with Ravenna. And what we saw, I guess, up until sort of late 2015, 16, customers then started having the appetite to put video on the IP layer as well. And then I think you really start doing some interesting workflows, but come with some level of complexity. So, when I joined in 2018, I think for me, it's really important to build a solution with IP that you don't need to have a degree in rocket science to be able to build it. And I think, at the end of it, it's operators that are operating the system. And so you should really try and make it as easy as possible for them to maximize the use of the technology, not be completely swamped by the technology. And I think what we've done over the last couple of years is we worked very hard on that. So back in April of this year, we introduced something called Home. And this is a core technology across the Lawo portfolio. And actually the first products to benefit from this are our audio production products. So if you were to go back a couple of years ago, and so still today, we sell our Nova 73 solution, which is a centralized audio router with DSP capabilities. We've now, over the last couple of years, introduced what we call our AUHD core, which is a distributed audio production system, where the elements are effectively distributed where you need them, but also the benefit of that means that you can control them remotely. So the console doesn't necessarily have to be anywhere near the actual processing unit. It can be on a layer 3 network in a different building, different state, different country even. And we have some customers that have taken advantage of that over the last 18 months. And I think the biggest challenge that we see then is, how do you make all these devices discoverable? Because as an operator, I don't really want to know where the device is. I just want to be able to see it and connect to it, and know that once I connect to it, I can still do the same production as I could do before, when it was sat only maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 meters away from me. And I think, IP really, as we introduced it, was just the first mechanism to transport the media signals, but actually now it unlocks much greater workflows. And I think in reality, adopting IP into our products was just the first step. Now we're going to start seeing really innovation in how we allow operators to be able to utilize the technology in a much more efficient way.
It's not like IP was sort of natively so suited or obvious for using as an audio and video and control, or maybe just an audio and video layer for transporting media around, was it?
I think there's been lots of attempts in the past to utilize different methods of transportation, whether that be TDM bus, whether that be packetizing it with compression. And I think that you come back really to the same constraints. Whether it's audio, whether it's video, we have really low tolerance to latency. So latency is, very important, whether you're matching up audio with video, or whether you're trying to listen to a return coming back, and you don't really necessarily want to have many, many seconds of delay thereafter. And I think the latency one has been a real aspect. And certainly if we look at video, for example, the network infrastructure simply hasn't been there to transport large payloads of video. So you were always forced to compress it. And by the nature of compressing, unfortunately, you run into the latency issue. And so I think if you look back, I guess 2015, 16 was really a tipping point. You start seeing larger networks become available. Since then, you've had 40 gig. More recently, you've had 25, 50, 100 gig. And now we're already talking about 400 gig. So the IP infrastructure, or the pipes that we move stuff on, I think now is more than capable of transporting it, even though we're still increasing the amount of bandwidth we need. So if you think about, UHD, or even moving forward, as many customers talk about 8K, for example, as a transportation format for video. So I think it's I always put it down to, it's like building houses. They're all incremental bricks, but you need all of them to come together in order to build a house. And I think audio was really a first step. It's very easy to put the samples into packets and move them to the network. It's fairly low bandwidth, which is also very good. And it's very easy then to build an infrastructure to be able to use it. The video one was really very difficult, and I would say around that time. And so we've only seen that advancement really in the last 4 or 5 years, where we have solutions for timing, and we have also solutions at the physical layer for capacity, but also more recently, you've seen newer compression technologies which are focused predominantly on latency.
So what is, excuse my ignorance, but like, what is Lawo's attitude or approach to video on the network?
Yeah, so we have a comprehensive portfolio. We have our vMatrix family. We have a common theme actually between all of our products at Lawo, where over the last couple of years we've tried to make all of our products reprogrammable, and this provides real benefit to the customers. So one day you can use it as a gateway to convert physical signals into IP. The next day you can use it as a multi-viewer. The following day you can use it as an up-down cross converter to convert the resolution of the signal. And we've done similar things with our audio products, where we allow you effectively to take a UHD core and use it as a DSP processing chain, or you can use it as an audio router, or you can use it as both. And so we think that this provides real benefit. It allows customers to get the maximum return on investment. But certainly in the video space, we've done everything from fly packs to large infrastructure like the NEP Andrews hubs in Australia, to large scale super trucks that do NFL games, Premier League games, and so on. So we really have managed to put our technology at the heart of really where the content is generated. But the one thing that we do see is it's very much about systemization. So customers are starting to think of these IP systems now as truly systems. They're not necessarily a group of boxes, because in the old days, the interoperability between devices was simply a cable. When you wanted to get an audio signal from one box to the next, you connect up an XLR or maybe even a MADI connection, and it would quite happily work. In the IP domain, whilst the encapsulation format might be standardized, you've still got to think about how you control the device. And so how do you program its receivers? How do you know where the device is, and how do you know what it's capable of doing? They're all other aspects. And we've put a lot of effort in that, in what we introduced in Home, to make that as simple and as easy as possible. So that actually, as a device connects to the network, it's instantly available for use, and the signals that it generates can be used by any device.
Yeah, I want to talk about Home a bit more in a minute, but you mentioned NEP, and clearly the two hubs that NEP built in Melbourne and Sydney were, I guess, world leading. They were breaking new ground. Could you describe, I guess, what was so why was it breaking the mold in so many ways?
Yeah, I think if you look at the model that NEP put, they've got such vast distance in Australia to cover content. And I think historically, you normally fly the production crew to the venue to do it. You obviously have to take the OB truck and drive it for many, many days to get it there as well. And I think what they came to the realization is, rather than move everything to the location, why don't you just back all the signals? And that really is huge. So when you think of the distances, I think a lot of people don't really appreciate the distance that you have in Australia, where you've got 4,500 kilometers. That's a big distance, and especially for me, where I come from the UK, and we can play maybe over 200 or 300 miles. So I think when you think of that, the distance, the amount of equipment you've got to move, the fact that you can't use it for the days up to the event, and you can't use it for the days after the event because it's in transit. Plus, you've got your highly talented crew that are not only flying to the venue to do the production, but they've also got time out to get there, time out to get back, all the tiredness, everything else that comes around that. It's much more efficient to bring the signals back to a central position and have people work in a more efficient way and avoid that. And I think that really comes also to the remote production model, which is better utilization of your technology. And so it allows you to use the talent where they're based. And so if they're based in Sydney or Melbourne, then they can just go to the local hub, connect to it, and work from that hub with all the connectivity that's provided. And I think, you look at that model, it really was groundbreaking. Not only was it one of the very first large-scale SIMD 2110 installations, but it really broke the ground from a perspective of showing people that you can do this and you can work remotely, and it's possible to back all the signals, and it's also possible for crews to work remotely together in a collaborative way. And certainly what we've seen since then is lots of other customers looking at that model. And certainly in the last 18 months, a lot of customers have really looked at that model, because it provides not only a blueprint, but we've seen some customers take it even one step further, where they take the replay controllers or the audio console and they put it in people's houses. So they actually, the replay operator or the audio operator doesn't necessarily even have to go to the facility to do it.
So is the days of the OB truck numbered, do you think?
I don't think they're necessarily numbered, because there's still an awful amount of OB trucks in the market that are not IP based. And I think we're not at the tipping point as an industry for IP just yet. You have to look at also the typical life of an OB truck. It can be anywhere, I guess, between 5-7 years. And so there's still a lot of trucks that will be on the road. What I do see is that some customers will still want the trucks to be at the venues. I hear quite a lot. Some of the directors say you get some of the atmosphere by being there as well. That comes across in the production. But when you think about the large sporting events where they have multiple trucks, multiple broadcasters, and providing all the world feeds, I think at that perspective, you might have trucks, but you might find that actually the world feeds get backhauled to the broadcaster rather than the broadcaster necessarily have to send a truck to the event itself. But I think everyone's going to try and feel their way here. I think it's going to be a case of some people will really embrace it and maybe just send the cameras to the event and backhaul everything. Some customers might decide to send the cameras and take a very small crew, and then again do some of the replays maybe back at base. And we have some customers that might just take the entire truck and do the production that way.
So just to talk a little bit more about home, I guess it occurred to me that we're in a stage of history with our technology that we're always being forced to choose an ecosystem. And I know that Lawo has a bunch of platform agnostic product, but it feels like with home, you are, I guess, building an ecosystem or asking people to choose. And obviously there are benefits in doing that. Do you want to what's the pitch for home and for the ecosystem?
Yeah, so we started the home project in 2018. I gave the team a really clear mandate of what we wanted to achieve. So first of all, it was to build a platform within Lawo that we could add other products and technologies to in the future in a more modern way. It was also to address a number of key areas where I felt the industry and certainly our customers could benefit from. And so I guess the two customer problems we were trying to address from day one was how can you build an IP system without all of the complexity? And most importantly, how can you allow a customer to maintain that IP system once Lawo's engineers leave the site and they've got to basically manage it moving forward? And so that they sound like two very simple problems, but they're actually quite challenging. And so the challenge I gave the team ultimately with the first one was, if I have a number of our box products, how quickly can I take them out of the box, connect them to a switch, and go through the stages where I can very quickly be routing audio and video through the system. And so because I think that's the customer expectation, is that I take a box, I rack it, I cable it to the switch, I turn on the services, and then everything is pretty simple from that perspective. The second one is, how do I manage the system? So, what you see with IP systems and reprogrammable devices is the software delivery is a lot more frequent because features come along a lot quicker. Because they're reprogrammable, you've got licenses. You need to be able to manage, track, use your licenses. And so we wanted to provide a mechanism that allowed customers to manage it themselves, so they didn't always have to phone a manufacturer to be able to upgrade the system safely or be able to move their licenses around. And from a technology perspective, I wanted the team to build something that is good for today, but is also very good for the future. And so it's built entirely in microservices where each element is effectively its own service, which means that when we want to modify, update, repair any of the services, we don't have to tear down any of the other services or do regression testing on the other services, which means it's very flexible, very agile for development. And the other side of that is it can run anywhere. So today we run the microservices on a gate server inside the console. If it's just a standalone console, that's really easy to do. Or we can run it in a cluster using Docker or Kubernetes. Or we have customers that want to run it in a hosted environment. So Microsoft Azure containers or AWS EKS, or running it on effectively a Linux instance, also running Kubernetes or Docker. So what we did was say, okay, in the future, our customers are really going to run the services where they want to run them. And that's the benefit. And the nice thing about that is because the services are decoupled, you can choose to run some services in one location and some services in the other location. And this means that it's highly flexible and agile. But we also felt that a lot of the open standards that were out there were not really looking and benefiting from some of the stuff that's happening outside the media and entertainment space. And so all the technology we have in home is built on open source technologies that you will find predominantly in the cloud environment, so the cloud native technologies. And so we didn't want to build any proprietary technologies. We wanted to utilize technology which is built for scale, built for security, built for resilience. And that was really important to us. The second side of it is exactly to your point, is how do you allow others to come and also play in this environment? And we've already made some advances and some progress with some of the other manufacturers to implement their technology in this environment. Again, it's, like I said, it's open source, and we're happy to do that. And from both sides, devices in our environment, but also control layers sat on top of our environment. And we have some further advancements coming early next year, where we will also add support for NMOS underneath Home as well, which means that you're not really restricted. You can either be a complete first-class citizen with being Home native, or we can bring also all the NMOS devices directly into the system as well. But I think from my side, it may very well be that we implement other discovery and mechanisms in the future, because what I've seen in the last 18 months is the industry has become more adept to using, I would say, other technologies like Dante, like NDI, just to name a few. And so I think it's quite possible that this infrastructure is going to have to accommodate them also in the future. And because of the architecture we built, it's not too hard for us to build an NDI service or a Dante service to complement the NMOS and the Home native. And so for me, it's really about having the ability in a common user interface to be able to see and discover and manage all of your content securely, no matter which way it's transported or discovered in the actual at the technology level.
I've read in another interview that you conducted that Lawo has looked into artificial intelligence and machine learning, and I wondered whether you had anything more to say about whether there was some practical applications for AI and machine learning in your equipment.
Yeah, so we actually spent quite a bit of time on this in the last couple of years, and so I think I'm always a big fan of looking at how the technology can fix customers' problems. And so I think obviously you can follow the buzzwords in the technology, but then ultimately if it doesn't fix a customer problem, it doesn't really provide any benefit. And so we've looked at AI in a couple of spaces. One is exactly the points you raise around the audio console and providing automated mixing or control of audio signals coming in. The other one is around pathfinding. So looking at the network and understanding how you can move stuff around the network. And so we spent some quite considerable amount of time in both areas. We do have some experience in it. Like I always say to people, is that AI is effectively an algorithm which you have a process that is learned, and then it can effectively adapt it from there on in. And we have some early kind of examples of that in the Kick product, where we use the tracking data from around the football pitch to bring up the mic levels around there. And I think that concept with some additional work actually provides us a good bedding to move forward. You will see some stuff in this space from us next year. We've got some ideas around the audio side that we're working on at the moment. It's a little bit too soon to really announce, but certainly I would expect by early middle next year you'll see something in this space from us. The pathfinding one, actually, in the end, we feel it's better to go with a more traditional algorithmic approach, because I think there are some operational concerns around things that might move around the network by itself, where maybe for a customer that wouldn't be too desirable. And so I think it's really, again, coming down to identifying the problem areas and seeing what is the best technology to fix that problem.
Do you think that sort of tribal attachment to brands and platforms that we've seen for years and years and years is starting to disappear?
Yeah, I mean, I always the way I look at this is that I get asked a lot, will the IT engineers replace the broadcast engineers or the audio engineers? No, they don't, because an IT engineer is very good at understanding the IT infrastructure, but in most cases they haven't any concept of how to look at video or measure it or monitor it or listen to it. So, and I think what I see with the big customers, the big broadcasters, they are bringing the engineering resources together, and they're trying to basically pass the skills back and forth so that you end up with a, with more like a hybrid approach. So you have IT engineers with an understanding of audio and video, and you end up with audio and video engineers with an understanding of IT. Now, that's one of the reasons actually we did the home, to be honest, because we don't necessarily want to have a very well-trained audio or video engineer that's got many years of understanding how to drive a console to then have to be consumed with having to load a lot of IT knowledge to be able to just get the thing to work. And so, and I think at the end of it, the most important part is actually the device that you're operating. It's actually irrelevant how the content gets to it or gets back from it or how it's connected. And so I think the having an understanding of IT definitely is beneficial, and I think you're probably going to see that with a lot of customers that hiring moving forward. They're going to ask for some level of basic understanding of what a network is, how it moves. Do I think you're going to see a loss of talent? No, I think you're still going to have that. I think that's still going to be important, because at the end of it, we're still moving audio and video. So you have to honestly have a very good understanding from an engineering perspective of how to deal with that. From the brand perspective, that's an interesting discussion, because I think where customers build large IP infrastructures, they go first and foremost with what works together. And so in some cases, then they may go against the operational decision for a specific product, because they say, okay, well, yeah, the product that you want doesn't necessarily interface very well with what the wider system that we're trying to build. But I can tell you, we still see a lot of alignment to manufacturers and products. Like I said to most people, I don't see that changing, because it's an emotional purchase. And so, a customer that sits in front of a Lawo console generally likes a Lawo console, and I would say a customer that goes and sits maybe in front of a Calrec console probably also likes a Calrec console. That's not too dissimilar to cameras, where you have somebody who likes a Sony camera versus a Grass Valley camera, or somebody who likes an EVS replay system versus maybe a Grass Valley replay system. They all kind of do the same thing, but as you know and you appreciate that it's the way it feels, the way it looks, it's the familiarization of where things are. And so I don't really see that changing. I would love it to change. It would open up surely a bigger market, but equally it would open it the other way as well. So I think at the end of it, you've got to put enough features and functionality, and you've got to listen to your market enough to put the things that are important to people into your product, and then hopefully they come and want to be able to have change.
I guess to that point, Lawo is obviously market leading in broadcast and live production, and but at least as far as I'm aware, at least in this part of the world, it's not got such a foothold, I guess, in that sort of installed AV market, theatre and large churches and whatnot. Like, what's your pitch to those sectors or those applications?
Yeah, I mean, we've started introducing products to get in that space. So we introduced a new MC² 36 Mark II. I think that it also comes down to the complexity thing, the price sensitivity around those markets. And so we're starting to introduce products into that space. We've got PowerCore Gateway, which is a new product we've introduced. We've got things like the A-Stage family. So we were building the portfolio to address what we call the application segment. So obviously we have been very focused, I would say the premium end of the market, but we are also building the portfolio to scale it down as well, to provide the technology we've had at the top end and also down into different markets. And I think that's really important. But I think also in those markets, again, it comes down to ease of use, and that's and I think if you look at the technologies that are the non-Lawo technologies in the space, it really is driven around that. But that's where we've put a real strong focus. And so we are seeing some uptake in that market. We've done pretty well in the US in that market, for example. But now we're trying to effectively lift that model and put it in other places as well. So we'll continue to bring new products. We've got some new products coming along in our radio portfolio at the end of this year, which will also allow us to get in, use some of that technology for those segments as well.
Cool. That's great, Phil. That's all I've got for you. I can let you go and have your first coffee of the day, or probably your third. I don't know, but I really do appreciate you stopping by and spending some time with us.
Not a problem at all.